Dzień dobry, witam serdecznie. Podczas ścieżki otwartej edukacji zajmowaliśmy...
Okay, guys, open education. So, the feeling that I guess you had right now, this big confusion, everybody talks in his own language, that was kind of the feeling I got when I got into the room the first time. I couldn't understand the word, and then I realized that the things that we all had in common was open education. And our main idea was developing educational models to spread in academic, high schools, and K-12. We aim to promote the culture of sharing and exchange within educational institutions. The idea is to create a culture of sharing and exchange at one of the most important fields as we see it, which is education.
One of the key highlights that I got from the Open Ed track was the process that we used to work through the issues and come to some common learnings. And as we tried to model with this creative little exercise with the languages, the whole process in our workshop was really very participatory, and it was modeled in Dubrovnik last year, where we all sort of started out on the same page, although there was different levels of expertise in the room. But there were some suggested themes for the workshop, and then we broke those apart and we threw them out to the audience, and we sort of came up with new themes. And in doing so, I think that everybody in the end felt like they were, again, sort of on the same page. So it was kind of this curve, and it was a really wonderful process.
Well, one of the things we discussed a bit deeper was the idea of branding open educational resources so we can achieve the same effect chain reaction, which worked perfectly for Creative Commons. So we can brand open educational resources and this will point people to information what open educational resources are. And of course, so we had a long discussion about how this could be done. We defined important questions about do we want to certify body or this is a certification. We run into Pandora box problems like what is open and is open, what kind of open standards are open, etc. And this is a discussion we would like to have in the coming years because we think this is something which may work perfectly for open educational resources.
We wanted to move this year from the idea of access to participation. And of course, for people to participate, and particularly for educators to participate, they need incentives. We came up with two practical ideas for incentives. One of them is the idea of a peer-reviewed review of open educational resources so that an academic could submit their open educational resource. It would be peer-reviewed, and it would count the same as having a peer-reviewed journal article. Just a way to hack the system. Another idea is that often teachers are concerned about the lack of resources in their own schools. Maybe it's electricity, maybe it's internet access. That one of the things we could do is say, well, when you use an open education resource, you can have a little PayPal button and people could say, I really love your resource, I'm going to give money to you to improve the conditions in your school. Now, these are practical suggestions. Last year, we had, as a consequence of the practical suggestions, we ended up with the Cape Town Declaration. And you've seen people walking around with these shirts. So that was last year, and the combination of some real work we did in the track last year was the Cape Town Declaration, Open Education, which you can read at that website, and sign. And I have 2 t-shirts left if you signed it. Sorry, 2 left. But this year, the question is, what will it be? What will we be talking about next year this time? Saying, well, in the intervening year, what did we achieve? Just like last year we achieved the Cape Town Day. Thank you.
So we are from the Open Business track, and our continuing challenge was to try and address or continue the question of open business is, which I'll come back to. We discussed collecting societies was a common topic. We had presentations by a few different business models that included quite a bit in the area of artists and music and things. And we debated and discussed a lot of the related issues and had presentations of some of the business models and discussing of them as well. The open business, what we ended up coming back to repeatedly was just this idea that, well, open business is, well, it's just business, but it's kind of a different way of doing it. So I think what the end result of what we came up with, that there isn't really a open business, it's more that there's businesses that implement open methodologies, such as sampling in the ways of free content and collaboration with the customers and transparency and some of the different features that are common between them. And a parallel example might be the idea that there's not really green companies. There's companies that implement green procedures and things and what they do and how they go about doing them.
Thank you. So, well, then where do we go from here? This is the next question. We've seen that business mainly is, well, open business is in a way same old business. And so the best way to talk about business is do business. So this is the direction that our lab would like to continue towards. And as we've seen the importance of practical cases in our experience, the first aim that we have is to gather together more cases and more open businesses out there, so to share, to have information about their experience and to know how they're implementing open business in their own industries. So this is our first aim. And also in this respect, we'd like to ask the iCommons community for next year to help us to find more examples and to bring them to discuss with us and share their ideas of what has gone on with their business. And then, well, the second aim we have is to invite the whole community, if you have any business idea, to share it with us. Now, we haven't had really, we couldn't get down to define exactly what open business is, so we're going to stick with the methodology. For now, we're going to use an open methodology for business. So if any of you has any idea and wants to share it to make it become reality, just, you know, log on our wiki page and discuss it with us, and from there we'll start together to see where open business is going for the future. So thank you.
Everybody came up in groups. I'm alone. But I wasn't alone for most of the research track, which made me very happy. We spent a fair deal of our time giving presentations of our work, something that to some of you may be boring, but to us was a very rewarding and enriching experience, I believe. And we dedicated just a little bit of time today to have a discussion on what to do next. And just this short discussion was also so amazing that I'm, first of all, very thankful to everybody who participated. It was actually the whole, organizing the whole research track, reviewing even submissions before we came here. It took a lot of preparation, and that actually was an entire open project, my first larger open project, if you like, and was very successful. I hope somebody will do a use case study on that once. And we started today by talking a little bit about, wanting to talk about common research topics that we would like to pursue, how to form an agenda that is both relevant for research, but also relevant to the mission of Creative Commons, useful for policy advising, decision making, and so on. We didn't make that much progress in that because we, instead of that, switched to what we should be doing next, practical issues. And we very quickly came up with means of disseminating our work beyond our academic community. That seemed to be a big desire that everybody had, through wikis, through the creation of an online journal, or the use of some existing journals, and there were a few things discussed on how to do that. The use of visualizations to better communicate our work to technical and non-technical audiences. And last but not least, we already agreed that next year we are going to have a probably larger, better and brighter, probably an entire conference on research on the commons, research on openness and freedom on the internet. that will hopefully be both scholarly, interesting, and relevant to all the action-oriented work that all of us are doing here. And I think we even have a venue and funding already secured for it. And that's like the best outcome I could have ever hoped for. In terms of the rest of you here who were perhaps not able to join in there, I hope that in one way or another you will be able to join and you will be able to keep advising the research that we do, and with your work keep inspiring us, because we realize that everybody who was actually on the research track is being inspired by the work that everybody else is doing here. So thank you very much for that.
First of all, thanks for having us. And I think we are the newest member of the Creative Commons family. And I hope it was an interesting experience for the people that came to the workshop, because we are a very young movement. We're still 120 people, I think, maybe a bit more after the event. But so what we did was mainly awareness raising and discussing and trying to learn from what Creative Commons has done and how you guys are organizing things. So maybe I use that opportunity also to say a little bit what we are about. So our understanding is that cyberspace is built on incredibly open and liberal values, and that there is a lot of important rights sort of implemented in that space. And we hope that it stays that way, but I think more than hoping, it's important to actually build a movement and define and enshrine a lot of these rights and work towards a secure space for these rights rather than trusted computing or secure computing the way the industry wants to sell us that. So we had a really lively discussion in the end of the workshop where we gathered a lot of input from and ideas from people that are active in the CC, and we hope to become a constant member of the family and be with you next year also.
Hi, I'm Robert. I was also part of the session. Just to give you a bit more details, we had a really interesting session. There are some of us that have been quite active in the Internet Bill of Rights Dynamic Coalition. It's something that comes from discussions that have taken place at the World Summit on the Information Society. And it was really interesting to share kind of our perspective of what we're doing. We got some very pointed questions which were very useful to us. People asked us, well, why exactly are you called Bill of Rights? Aren't you just a rights coalition? What exactly is your target, and are you more a facilitation group, or are you actually building a constitution or something in between? And not having had those pointed questions asked at us before was really useful. And kind of the consensus was that right now we're kind of a social movement that has a lot in common with iCommons. There's some of the same approach that we've been doing, and so we saw that there's a lot that we could probably collaborate with. And when that discussion started going, people were quite interested. And a couple things that kind of came up is, are there people in different countries, from the north and from the south, from developed and developing countries, that could participate as well? And I think that was very useful. And in terms of kind of other things as well too, is it was really good, in terms of some of the sessions that took place. Max and his colleague Vittorio went through some of the history. Then there's a bit of kind of presentation in terms of specific things that members are doing, and also the tie-in with the issues of IPR, and how that if you take it some of the IPR issues, that if you move them kind of to a higher level, there are rights issues as well with technology and the internet. And so we saw that that there's also a lot of fit. And so I could go on, but it was just really great to get some of the comments, and we really look forward to engaging all of you going forward. Thank you.
Hello everyone. So we're reporting from the DIY track. And first of all, we called our presentation, did YouTube kill the television star? Did YouTube kill the television star? And basically we're trying to explore new tools, DIY tools, channel sources, software, platforms that are taking the audience more from the television screen into the computer screen. Additionally, we tried to define what is actually open video. So one definition we came up with was, Open video is an emerging field of video production that uses open tools and transparently shares information regarding the process of pre-production, sourcing material, crafting the work, post-production, distribution, and finally creates a digital archive to make the raw material and the finished material available for both viewing and remixing.
I think one of the important aspects of this is the idea of symbiosis. The idea that different individuals from different technologies, from different arts can come in and work together. So the idea of being able to postings, for example, in Wiki, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as goals, to be able to truly be a symbiotic entity is probably one of the things that we felt strongly about. One thing about our meetings is we had some very, very interesting participants who brought in many, many different resources for us. So we covered certain areas here, as you can see on the board. With distribution, a number of the participants had loads of suggestions, and we tried to talk about what works and what doesn't work. For example, YouTube is appropriate for certain types of projects, but it isn't necessarily a panacea. And it seems as the discussions wore on, we were able to come up with, there's a lot of this open source material that's being developed. The one was the Remix America, for example. And these are projects that are often being done at universities, where they're being developed by faculty and technology folks. And it's amazing what's coming out. So what we've done is we've come up with a number of these different platforms to use. Blip TV, for instance, we use a lot for podcasting. It's very useful. And for instance, we do blogging with our students. So you might combine Blip TV, you may combine a couple other formats, and then you have a podcast or a video cast together. So it seems like a lot of these platforms really do work together. They don't stand out as single entities. You can actually combine them and get some amazing tools to use.
Yeah, the most important part is that all these tools are working. We are taking the audience from television into internet. People are growing up. People every day is looking at watching a movie on their laptops, and sorry.
Okay, so we've created this document with which we plan to share on the Wiki Commons. Basically, it has all the platforms, websites, links, and our feedback on how they're working, what are the pros and cons of each one of these. So we worked on online platforms for distribution, and then later we went on to BitTorrent distribution, other online applications that help with applications for getting into film festivals, for example. Then we went on to multilingual peer-to-peer and subtitling, what's available online and what works, and again, what are the pros and cons. Other video production tools and communication, social community networks that work along with video and that work along in promoting our videos, blogs, construction community websites, mobile technology. And then later we discussed some noteworthy open video production cases that we thought are really relevant to the topic and very successful at the moment. And finally, some of the biggest challenges about defining what actually open source video is, or what is going to happen from now onward, is creating actual new models of film production that merge the idea of open business with models of film production, and measuring what the impact that they're having and whether they're successful or not.
Finally, one of the things during our session is I think there's a real positive attitude about everybody in the session working together. We've already started that, where we'll have an ongoing discussion. And for example, Skyping and iChatting with each other and developing these different projects and platforms. So it's a real interactive thing. I mean, I think our session was very, very productive. And it really is just a collective. And that's, I think, what this whole thing is about. It's a collective of people who are very dedicated and have one basic goal in mind, even though we come from different backgrounds, is able to use that together. So it's very productive. Okay.
And then finally, we elaborated a list of best practices with good common citizenships for DIY video makers. As you can see here, one would be to release your work under the most permissive CC license possible for your project, because the nature of each project will be quite different. To release the work in the highest quality possible, to allow people to use it in the best quality that you are able to put it online. To release your raw materials, so it's not only about your finished project, but also make available everything that you have shot and tag it properly so people can actually use it for their own videos and their own work. When we collect music or B-roll releases, clearances, to make sure to specify that it will be open license. So that way there is no conflict between the actual releases that you have attained and later CCing that material. To be format agnostic and transparent, which is basically to upload Internet Archives and just to make it available in different formats to allow for cross-platform, whether you're working within Mac platforms or window platforms, but to allow for different people to use it within different editing programs. Later, to upload timelines, project files, XMLs, EDL, any information that will allow people to understand how your creative process developed. Also, to remix respectfully, bringing high ethical standards to the community, so to be careful that if you are taking available material, CC material, bringing CC material to your projects, you're not misrepresenting the community that you're speaking about, or misrepresenting the topic you're talking about. And that's it, basically. And then we will continue to add to this wiki.
That's it.
では、日本語のトラックについては日本語と、ドミニクさんの方が英語で、簡単に概要を、ご説明したいと思います。Dominic will translate in English. 日本語のトラックではいくつか大きなテーマを設けまして、著作権制作であるとか、オープンなコンテンツを支える技術の在り方、オープン教育の現状と課題、オープンビジネスの在り方、いろいろな、トピックについて第一線で活躍の、皆様に、ご登壇いただいて議論を戦わせましたけれども、先端事例の、ご紹介を通じて、非常に短い時間ではありましたけれども、議論をしたりした中で出てきたことの、共通の課題として私どもが、認識をしていることは、大きなビッグプレイヤーの人たちが、クリエイティブコモンズの動きを、採用して、そして、要はトップダウンな動きで、クリエイティブコモンズのようなオープンな動きを、促進していくという動きと、むしろそのピアプロダクションと本当に草の根の動きが、まだその十分に、混じり合って本当に完全に機能していないんではないかということが、一つの課題としていろんなところで、議論されたと思います。で、トップダウンの動きとしてはもちろんそのトップアーティストが音楽や映像でいろいろな利用をしてくださっていることですとか、教育でも、大学における、OCW の動きなどがあるんですけれども、その発信された情報というのが本当に本当の意味で、たくさんにミックスされているというにはまだまだ発展の余地もあると思いますし、逆に、アマチュアの方たちが、音楽、映像、教育などの分野で活動をしてくださっているものも、それが大きく育っていくための例えばビジネスモデルであったりとか、その利用がお互いにどういうふうに使われていって、どう発展していっているのかということをその権利者自体が、よくトレースできないとか、そのいろんな貢献の、インセンティブの分配が、うまくできていないというような問題が、残っているというふうに考えています。
So in the Japanese tracks panel discussion, we conducted 4 panel discussions. One was on education, business, technology, and policy. we found out that there was a common topic, which was how to bridge the big players' movements, such as rights and content holders, and the bottom-up movement of lay creators in relation with open content. So for instance, as for top-down approaches, there have been examples of music or visual artists, very famous artists, using CC license. And you have, for instance, the open courseware with established university within academia. But there still needs the general users at the same time to actually use these contents. And on the other hand, you have the amateur users applying CC licenses for derivative creation or textbook editing. But however, these are not well structured yet as business models, as working business models. And there are also still problems of traceability of derivative works, and implementation of efficient incentives are still big issues to be solved.
で今後は、このような2つの動きをどのように相互につなげてより成熟した生態系を作っていくのかということは課題だと考えておりまして、ユーザーの皆様、技術開発者、ビジネスプレイヤーの皆様と継続的に協議をしたり、制作分野の方たちとも議論を戦わせながら、より良いライセンス作り、システム作りに向けて協力をしていけたらと思っております。
So in order to fill this gap between these two separate domains, we will try to create a more mature ecology of open contents, and this can only happen by continuing communicating with the related parties such as the users, but also with the technologists, evangelists, and business players.
でこのような目的で、CCJP として今回取り組んだことは、2つの、コンペティションでありまして、1つは、このクリプトンさんという会社とご協力をして、一般公募でクリエイティブコモンズの公認のキャラクターを1つ、募集をさせていただきました。でこういうボトムアップで生まれてきたキャラクターを今後その CCJP の成長とともに、一つの、実験の場というかですねとして、いろんな成長の仕方として、育てていけたらいいというふうに考えております。で一方音系という、ビデオのミュージックビデオのコンペティションでは大きな5つの、企業さんにご協力をいただいて、またビッグアーティストの方から楽曲を提供してもらいつつ、逆に一般の方からはその、ミュージックビデオのもちろん編集もそうなんですけれども、素材そのものを提供してもらって、その両方の融合を図りつつ、今後の、検討課題というかいろいろな示唆を問う、実験ができたと考えております。
So most recently, we conducted two experiments with this idea of users both from top-down approach and bottom-up approach. So the first one was a collaboration with a local IT venture called Krypton Future Media. And we asked the users to submit an official mascot that kind of represents Creative Commons Japan as an organization, so which you can see here. And this new creature we just gave birth to, we will need to nurture this through many collaborations in the future. So we're actually planning to create, organizing secondary competition, or third competition using those mascots. The other experiment was a music video competition led in collaboration with 5 Japanese video sharing services who all adopted this Creative Commons license. And in this competition, we especially took care of how to promote more chain of creation between competitors, not just trying to create completed works. So we set up a material category along with a completed works category, so to promote chains of creation in a better way.
でそちらのコンペですとか、パネルディスカッションの他に、オープンコンテンツを用いた実際のワークショップも、開催をいたしまして、たくさんの地元の方々、それから日本の参加者、もしくは海外の方にも、いらしていただいて、実際にオープンコンテンツの良さを実感していただいたと思っております。
Besides those panel discussions and competition, we also conducted quite a few workshops during the iSummit, and we were very, very happy to see that greater amount of people, local people, also came involved to experience the concept of open license on a real-world basis, which was really great.
今後の課題ですけれども、せっかくこの場にたくさんの方が一堂に会して、それぞれの取り組み、問題意識が共有できている部分もできていない部分も、それぞれ認識ができたことかと思いますので、これを今後、この札幌という都市から世界中に、日本中に、そして世界中に、人の輪を通じて、もしくはインターネットの力を通じて、発信をしていくことによって、より発展をできたらいいなと思っております。
So finally, we were very, very happy to have shared various approaches and issues and point of views, both in the local context, so you have those big players in Japan, you have the bottom-up players also in the same local context, but also to be able to have shared with the local and global context at the same time in this iSummit. So we now hope that this collaboration will continue in a more fruitful way within Japan and, of course, on a global scale. Thank you.
Okay. Local context, global commons. We, under the very expert guidance of Rebecca, we went through identifying the problems that publishers, editors, translators, and people working at getting information out of the public sector, especially out of archives, into the commons. The translators, we heard a lot from the extraordinary group at Lingua around Global Voices, editors and publishers from 5 Minutes to Midnight, Kratham Books, and Overmundo, and in the archive space, we heard a lot about what was going on in Australia, Hungary, and Canada. We distilled the issues that these groups are dealing with into particular themes that we thought that iCommons naturally had a role in supporting with. And in particular, we identified a facilitating role, which is making all of these people, all of these groups doing somewhat similar things more than the sum of their parts. An aligning role, which is we identified these groups are not always aligned in what it is that they want, and iCommons should work to find common ground between those constituencies. And then, much more specifically, it was thought that iCommons should be working at providing discriminatory tools in one way or another for use on the commons and by commons content. And discriminatory tools are things like brands, things like endorsements, and generally making the commons more findable and more accessible. And in terms of very specific goals, let me pass it on to Mohammed, who will take us through our recommendations.
Okay, so we decided to create two lists, mainly. The first list would be the best practices and the guidelines for authors, creators, and content providers. The second list, which would be the wish list. The wish list will contain some kind of tools, research projects, resources that we will endorse and we will support strongly, but not necessarily conduct ourselves, but still we will provide the full support for such projects in so many levels. For example, the projects we talked about, like creating tools for translator to bridge the gap between people from different cultures, from different languages, tools like terminological dictionaries, multilingual dictionaries, tools like content finding tools with less bias or with better attribution to the authors and content providers. And these are the main two goals that we thought of now Jessica will tell you about the East Asian case.
Alongside, as part of the Local Context Global Commons, we had a little sideline of Asia Commons. We had one meeting in particular where we tried to talk about the issues important to the local community of the Commons in particular. A bit more, less local than Japan, a bit more local than the rest of the world. In that we discussed very similar themes, particularly translation of cultures. That seemed to be, translation on a broader sense, not just translation of language, but translation of cultures seemed to be a big concern and a big theme that we really felt needed to be dealt with, an important focus of the Asian Commons community to kind of find common ground between cultures that often are very different and have quite different goals, and also to find common ground between these cultures and the Commons, as you know, and copyright issues as well. A lot of these cultures have different backgrounds that don't relate to the Western cultures that kind of dominate the Commons community and the copyright community that the Commons community comes out of. So finding a way to draw upon these different cultures, translate them, and at the same time translate the Commons back to these cultures. And coming out of that, one of our solid goals, and I'm sorry I didn't write a list for some of the others, so I'm just going to speak about the one that we spoke about again in the last session of Local Context Global Commons, is creating a case studies archive, hopefully along with iCommons. As part of the goals of creating guidelines and examples and to assist people to facilitate the use of the Commons, we think it'd be a good idea to have some examples of how people are using the Commons. It'll be, we haven't got plans yet, but hopefully it will go up sometime next year.